So all weekend we've had kind of people talking and we've had people performing. Tonight, it's a first. Someone who's talking and performing. Please welcome from Derry, Dermot McLaughlin, who's the project director of UK City of Culture 2013. So, like the whole idea behind this is that, like next year, Other Voices will travel the Atlantic way to Derry from Dingle, and to mark the Maiden City's 10 years UK City of Culture. So Dermot's here basically to talk a bit about that, to talk about what we can expect from Derry next year, and to talk about legacy issues as well, both existing legacy issues and future legacy issues for Derry. But aside from that, Dermot's also one of the best fiddle players in the country, and we've asked him to bring along his fiddle and to play some tunes.
Okay.
So we're going to start with a tune. What's the tune?
Yeah, this tune will start off with. It's a slow tune called Westland Winds. It's the tune of a song that I would associate with a lot of the slightly different key from that now.
I didn't know Marty Morris.
Yeah, it will be associated with a lot of the Ulster singers. It's got connections with Robbie Burns. It epitomises some of that connection between North of Ireland and Scotland socially and culturally. It also touches on military history and things like that. The first words are those Westland winds and slaughtering guns, which are recurring themes in the north, of course. But it's a nice gentle kind of tune for this time of the evening.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much. It's another first for Banter. We've had many firsts this weekend. We've had poets, and now we've had an amazing fiddle player as well. Dermot, maybe a little bit of background as to how you ended up with the job of project director, because I know you knew you best from Temple Bar in Dublin. You were you were working there. So maybe talk a bit about how you ended up in Derry.
Yeah,
how you ended up back in Derry.
Back in Derry, yeah, the pathway. I was born in Derry in 1961, so I'm a 51-year-old with the body of a 50-year-old, which is a good place to start. I moved to Dublin in 1979 as a student. I went to Trinity College to study early and modern Irish. Some people would say that was a career-limiting move because unless somebody dies in academia, you're not really going to get a position talking about infixed pronouns and preterite subjunctives and things like that. However, it's a good subject because a bit like Latin or Greek, it disciplines the mind in certain ways, and it's a multidisciplinary subject. So to study Old Irish, you have to be open to lots of different sources of information and approaches. So I did really well at that, and I was lucky enough to get a foundation scholarship in Trinity, which meant my accommodation was sorted out, and I was getting a very generous student grant from the British government. So that funded my fiddle playing development as well, which was good. And I was engaged in postgraduate research in Old Irish when I saw a job opportunity come up in the Arts Council in Dublin for traditional music officer. And I applied for that, and after 3 interviews, which was an awful experience, I was offered a job, and I was absolutely horrified because I don't know why I went for it. And then when I got it, I said, Christ, what'll I do now? Anyway, I went into the Arts Council, and I ended up in there for 17 years doing a range of different jobs. I ended up as one of the assistant directors and that I worked at that for 5 years, and that brought me into contact with a lot of arts organisations. I was involved in setting up funding systems, doing a lot of work setting up support systems for individual artists, revenue grant systems, capital grant systems, did freedom of information, all these things you have to do, you know. I was turning into some kind of a Sir Humphrey Appleby, and I thought, enough is enough. And I decided to leave in 2002, but I had no plan. And then at the end of that year, I was offered a job in Temple Bar Properties, as it was. And at that stage, that was about 10 years after the Temple Bar regeneration project had started, and the physical regeneration was complete. So largely all of the buildings were done. A lot of the gap sites had been filled in. Most of the property disposals had happened. So you had this company called Temple Bar Properties. It was still in business. It didn't really have a very clear mandate, except that a political decision was made, i.e. the government decided to keep it in business. But the board itself wasn't quite sure where it was going next. My job was to come in and provide leadership and direction to keep the concept of Temple Bar, turn down the volume on properties, and bring in culture, arts, creativity. So in the 9 years I've been there, the company has refocused and rebranded. It's now called Temple Bar Cultural Trust. And I suppose you could say in that company we're in the business of placemaking rather than being a landlord, and rather than being an arts organisation, and rather than being some kind of vague cultural entity. And when I talk about placemaking, you know, I would have in mind like trends in contemporary urbanism and policy planning, where governments or local authorities see that there's much more to a place than just the buildings and spaces. There's the people, there's the social capital, there's the advantage of place brands and place destinations. So a lot of my work in Temple Bar has been about that. As John was saying,
it's an interesting mix though, because I mean, a lot of people associate Temple Bars with just, I suppose, the bars as historically were there, you know, and some of the cultural organisations. Yeah. A lot of people forget about the residents that live there.
You see, it's a very easy thing. It's a very easy thing to believe a lot of the hype and the bullshit as well about Temple Bar. Yeah, like if you want to go and get a sore head, you can do that in Temple Bar, but you can do it anywhere in Dublin these days. You can do it in Tullamore. You can do it in.
Not speaking personal experience, quickly.
You know, and there were, you know, there's no point denying the warts and all stories. There was a period of time when, because of Ryanair and good strong currency variations and all that stuff, Dublin and Temple Bar had the big pubs. It had the carefree attitudes to licensing and public order enforcement. It encouraged high-spending yobs to come and get pissed and puke all over the place. That's what happened. Sure, we've all seen it. When I started there, that's exactly what was going on. It happens now to a lesser extent because there are better value places to go if you want to get sloshed on the cheap. That's a good thing. But that's one part of the story. But the whole story of Temple Bar goes back a very long time. Like it goes back into the late Iron Age, early Viking Age. You know. But today for me, Temple Bar it's like a wee town in the middle of Dublin. There's about 3,000 people live there. There's over 450 small businesses. There's a really interesting, like for me, here's where the money is. The money and the future is going to be in the cluster of small scale creative enterprises that are there working in not so much conventional arts, i.e. subsidised organisations, but more in graphic design, software, gaming. There's a really interesting thing going on there at the moment. You know, there's a Temple Bar Creative Network that we kicked into shape about a year ago. That started off with about 60 members. There's now around 180 affiliated to it. To me, what will keep Temple Bar relevant and valuable will be things like that. And the reason I say that is if a place is going to be successful these days, it has to be different and attractive. I'm not too sure if anybody here is that attracted to going to a place that's known solely for nightclubs. If you are, you've made a bad call coming here, for example. But you know, so the Temple Bar project is really interesting because it raises another issue that's really ad rem when you're looking at the Londonderry UK City of Culture 2013 project.
We'll come to that now.
And that's the idea of regeneration or revitalisation in an urban area. If you think that's a project, it has a beginning and an end, you're wrong. If you accept that that it's a process. You're getting off to a good start. And I think what I've learned and continue to learn from Temple Bar and from other cities around the world is if you don't have a moving target of like what's the perfect end result, I think you're sunk. So for one period for one phase, the Temple Bar moving target was first get it built and then get it established as a brand or destination. So the best ways to do that were using cultural events and then populate it with arts organisations, repopulate it with citizens who used to live there, and make it a tourism friendly destination. All those things have been done. The job now is to keep those going. But the world gets tired very fast, and I think people do have finite attention spans as well. So there need to be better, more memorable reasons for people to spend their time and money in Temple Bar rather than say the Rosses of Donegal or Connemara or Barcelona or Toronto. And my guess is, and certainly what I hear from people in the tourism industry and frontline in the hospitality sector, is that people are still looking for something that's more, I'll use the words authentic and memorable, because that's what people are looking for when they come to Temple Bar as much as Ireland. So that's still work in progress.
Yeah. They're also looking for something new as well, which is where we kind of move on to Derry, London, Derry, UK City of Culture 2013. What attracted you to that job?
What attracted me to that job? I suppose something that I hate, which is insular, introverted, parochial small-mindedness. I'm from Derry, and I couldn't turn it down. Yeah. So there was an unrational motivation for doing it. If somebody said to me, Dermot, could we interest you and come to Belfast for a year or coming to Edinburgh or somewhere, I'd probably say not really. But because it was Derry and I'm from there and I have a history there, I felt an enormous, I suppose, almost an emotional obligation to, first of all, consider it seriously. But what really attracts me to it is the time in which it's happening as much as anything. If you think back, the way I look at this now is a pivotal moment, 1994 ceasefires. That was the start of a process that had begun some time earlier with talks about talks, etc. If you look at the how far we've come, speaking as an antique from the 60s and 70s, it's the right time for something like this to be in Derry, because it addresses an agenda that I think is still often overlooked in the peace process, and we're still in peace process in Ireland. Don't forget, it's not a thing that stopped all of a sudden one day. There's the internal settlement within the north, I suppose, which is one kind of peace, but maybe there still isn't sufficient reconciliation there, and I think that's still work in hand. The north-south arrangements are improving all the time, but the really interesting one for me is the east-west between the two islands. And I see the UK City of Culture project as a really fantastic example to put some motive force behind that, and to do it in a place that has resonance, I think, between the two land masses or the two islands, London and Derry. And I also think as well that the fact that it's the first such designation in the UK adds to I suppose, the weight of expectation. And a final thing I would say is that I really believe that Derry is a city that throughout its history has played really interesting parts in history at pivotal times, whether it's the fact that intellectual property and copyright law was invented by St. Colin Killenderry, right the way through to its role as a strategic stronghold for Britain and others, right through to the World War II, its importance as a strategic naval base, the fact it's got an intact walled city that represents wealth, prosperity, domination, all these things. These are all really potent things. But I think there's all of that. There's more recent awful history like Bloody Sunday, for example, and everything that goes with that, and the Savile inquiry. And when you string all these things together into some continuum, it's interesting that Derry has popped up from time to time at pivotal moments in history. For me, it's history isn't characterised by uniformity and immutability. It's characterised by fluidity, I think, and it's in the moment. And I think the UK City of Culture is one of those moments. So I don't think I could sleep at night if it turned the offer down. Yeah.
Let's start with, I suppose, kind of a, it maybe kind of seems a lighthearted question, but it's a pretty serious kind of question. You referred earlier on there now to, to the Derry, London, Derry, UK City of Culture. Like, it's quite a mouthful, and then when you were talking there now, you referred to Derry, and we all here in Dingle refer to Derry, it's Derry, Derry, Derry. How, I know you're a political operator. You wouldn't have kind of like lasted so long in the arts council without having being a diplomat, which I'm not, or being a politician, But like, have you found yourself straying? And like, to talk us through the kind of like the semantics of it,
Yeah. Well, if you imagine growing up in Derry in 1961, I'll tell you some interesting memories I have, and then I'll try and piece these together. A lot of the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, or the 6 counties, whatever you want to call it. I actually don't care what you call anything anymore at my age, to be quite honest. I couldn't give a fiddler's fuck, and I have a fiddle here. Like, a really strong memory I have is my father taking me on his shoulders out on a march. So there was a civil rights march, NACRA, Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association. And I was maybe 7 or 8, And my dad and all his mates were involved in the labour movement and trade unionism and looking for things, like really simple things. People might not believe us, but a vote, the right to vote, can you believe that? In 1961, Jesus. So a vote, a house, a job, education. Sounds a bit like Alabama, but there was a lot of overlap of thought at the time. Like in my house in Derry, I suppose we would have been conversant with names like Wolfe Tone, Martin Luther King, Thomas Paine, the way my parents were. So like growing up in Derry, me and I suppose my family and my peers at school, we would have been very, very conscious that we're in an unusual place because the whiff of CS gas was in the air. Anybody here ever smell CS gas? No?
Yeah.
Right? Tough stuff. So you're growing up in a like your normality is a bizarre militarized zone, right? There's smells that are associated with it, there are sounds that are associated with it, there are objects that are associated with it, like all the paraphernalia of formal military and paramilitary life, and that was all around. So when the British Army moved in and you started getting stopped in the street and searched, if you're 10 and you're walking around with a fiddle in a fiddle case, and there's some smart-ass little bollocks giving you a stick about, oh, have you got a Tommy gun in there, Paddy, right? You're inclined not to respond, oh yes, sir, it's a violin. It's a lovely folk violin. Would you like me to play you a little tune? You're more likely to say, you go and fuck yourself, which is what you tend to do. And so you get abused about that. Where are you from? I'm from Derry. Where's that? You get stopped driving a car. Show me your driver's license. It says here Londonderry. And you say, well, I'm from Derry. So if you had £1 or €1 now for every hour you spent standing at the side of a road at night while your car gets searched, all putting you up to saying Londonderry. There was this big competitive thing about the name. Of course, we were too thick. We'd never say it, Defiant. To what end, you might ask. So there's all that baggage goes with the name. Yet, simultaneously, in Derry, part of the, until things went out of control, part of the joy, I suppose, of being a wee Wayne in Derry was seeing some of the marches and the bands. Fantastic pipe bands would come in, for the apprentice boys and the Orange marches. But then all that became kind of no-go territory. And like when I was a young fella and a teenager, I suppose the fiddle was a good badge of identity, almost like a protective cloak in some ways. A really assiduous love for the Irish language. Well, I think it might have been a love, or it might have been you just thought you needed more badges of identity. I remember after Bloody Sunday saying, I'm never watching a soccer match again because that's an English game. Like, that's totally non-rational 12-year-old response. But that's the kind of time you grew up in. So the names of things at that stage were really, really important. So, you'd need to be put in a rack, like, and have a barbecue lit on you before you'd say Londonderry, Whereas to me now, I don't care. I have no interest really anymore in that because I've moved long beyond that. I've no interest in even.
Do you think most people have moved beyond that?
No, I think a lot of people have, but there's the fact that I think it's still I think it's still there as it's a bit like the fart in the spacesuit that Billy Connolly talks about. It's still there, but I would actually take a more positive view on this. The fact that most people most of the time can live with Derry, Londonderry, or Londonderry, Derry, or Derry stroke Londonderry, or stroke City, or Legendary. You know what? Like, you could take a view that if that's a way to get you out of a hellhole, let's go for it. You know, like I've been back in Derry about a month now, and I've encountered nothing but positive interest and goodwill and offers of help. The only time I encountered any kind of needly question about the UK thing was in an interview in the wireless with on an Irish language programme, and the journalist asked me in Irish, like almost with it, like it was, the question was just dripping with expectation and assumptions. You know, it was along the lines of, but Dermot, you know, I could just feel the arm coming around the microphone saying, but Dermot, old friend, you know, Akara, surely this must be really difficult for you working on a thing called UK City of Culture. And I said, no, not at all. This is fantastic. I mean, Jesus, there's £200 million sterling capital investment stuck into the city all of a sudden. Big projects are brought forward, like the upgrade of the railway line, expansion in the university, investment in broadband, etc., Peace Bridge in place, big public works, and there's the guts of 15 million for programming, UK City of Culture, and about 1.5 million on marketing. Show me the problem, you know. And it's just amazing that you still get this antique view of where we are. But like I can't ignore that, and I can't be too dismissive of it, because somebody really still believes that passionately. You know, I think that the challenge for everyone now is that if people want to disagree or express dissent, there are lots of ways of doing it now in either language. And I think for me, you know, like within 10 days of moving back to Derry, I had met Sinn Féin, the DUP, Ulster Unionists, SDLP, the Chief Constable of the PSNI, the Apprentice Boys of Derry, the Orange Order, met the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland last week. It's a highly politicised and highly engaged politically environment there. But the consistency is, Jim, that everybody wants us to work really well. And so, yeah, I don't know how... I don't know what my survival skills will be like in that particular environment, because we're very different from the toxicity of the Temple Bar thing in the early days, and it's very different from the kind of the Arts Council manoeuvring. It's kind of harder in some ways, but it's just another thing. The big thing for me is what the City of Culture project doesn't need is somebody to come along and say, "Oh, I've got a fantastic new idea for the programme." There's a programme in place. What the City of Culture project needs is a boy like me to come along who can see that there's probably 8 or 9 big component parts that need to be fitted together. Just one of them is the programme. There are much more difficult areas to do. What you mentioned, legacy a wee while ago. The legacy parts of the programme will be fed and platformed in some way by the events, but that's just one part of it.
Yeah.
And I think.
Because I mean, legacy is going to be more than just about like building new spaces or creating new festivals. Legacy is also going to be about what it leaves behind for the actual people in Derry, in terms in the future, in terms of like the encouragement and the inspiration to create more art, create more cultural events, create more things like culture tech, and create more things like Celtronic.
Well, and jobs as well. You know, like the role I have, project director for it. Well, I'll just tell you what the mechanics of that are, just so there's no kind of mystique about it. I'm on secondment from Temple Bar Cultural Trust, and I'm on secondment to an organisation called the Strategic Investment Board Northern Ireland, and I am then assigned by them to Derry City Council, and Derry City, the buck stops with Derry City Council for the City of Culture project, and then you have Culture Company, which is the organisation that's put together the programme for it. So the job I have to do now is to take all that work that's been done already, other work that other agencies have been working on, lots of commitment and goodwill and motivation that's out there in the voluntary and commercial and business sector, in the hospitality sector and politically, and try to pull all that together into a unified, coherent effort. I was going to say a big bang, that's the wrong word to use, a big effort for 2013. So the skills that are involved, they're going to involve some a certain diplomacy, I suppose, patience. But there's not a whole lot of time to be having big discussions about why are we here. That's done, Like this is the 2nd of December. Um, 2013 is upon us. So what I'm bringing to this is a mixture of project management skills. I'm generally pretty good at motivating people and getting the best out of people and allowing people to do what they're good at and shine. I'm generally good at spotting obstacles, whether they're process obstacles or resource obstacles or just maybe blind spots or cabin fever. I'm generally good at that, so I know I can do that stuff. The challenge is whether within the tiny time frame available, I can make all this work. But I've got an enormous amount of support right across the spectrum. But I think as well, one thing I have to get across to people is, I mean, I've described this, jocosely as Derry has been in a period of multiple orgasms for the last while, and the first orgasm was when Derry got the designation as UK City of Culture, and the next one was when the programme was published just about a month ago. But now it's I don't know what the right analogy is next, but
should have told that one true.
We have to get at it.
50 Shades of Derry.
We have to get at it. We have to get at it hammer and tongs now for delivery. And the legacy thing is really interesting for me because, what we don't want to happen is that Derry looks or feels or sounds like a festival for a year failure. It's not about that. So there's a really sophisticated piece of work to get done to make sure that the incoming events are not just beautiful ephemeral things that were here and gone. That's not good enough. And there's an enormous amount of work being done that's currently invisible. It's under the radar work, and there's guys like Martin Malarkey from the Nerve Centre doing absolutely stunning work and making sure that through programmes like the Music Promise, for example, and What's the Big Idea, that thousands of kids and adults are now engaged in a way that will be fed by the incoming events, but doesn't depend on the incoming events for sustainability. There's a bit of genius at work in there. I'm really interested as well in making sure that people are not thinking that everything will be turned around as a result of 1 year, in 1 year, because that's just nuts if you think that. For example, there's an employment target set of 1,300 new jobs in the digital economy. That's not going to happen in 12 months. But for sure, if we make sure that fantastic things like culture tech get priority and get the kind of support they need to grow and develop, because culture tech looks and feels to me like it has a lot of the ingredients of a neophyte South by Southwest. It's got a lot of that in it and a different kind of attitude. But my strong view is that where Derry can win here in the next 5 to 10 years will be in and around the digital, whether it's under the Digital Derry logo or the Culture Tech brand. But to give people, investors, people who want to come back home, people who want to start things up, to give them a reason for coming back. I think there's an incredibly fertile piece of ground there at the moment. So to me, that's really interesting. It's a little bit like using some of the principles that I've been involved in the Temple Bar project with others. It always depends on others. You can't do this stuff in your Todd,
Yeah, you mentioned there that, one of the first parts of excitement there was when Derry actually got the designated City of Culture tag. A lot of people were very surprised because they could see, we see with Belfast, they could see with the Mac opening, to see a lot of kind of interesting cultural things happening in Belfast. It was like, Derry, what's happening in Derry? In many ways, do you think something like next year is going to focus outside people's attention to the city up there on the border with Donegal on its hinterland, and the amount of things that's going on, the amount of things that can happen there, and also for the artists, the creative people, the tech, the geeks, everyone in Derry like this, it's a huge opportunity, and are they ready for it?
I think ready, yeah, willing. Yes, but I think there's still a realization and a belief that has to set in as well. I would say myself, the geek sector are probably well prepared psychologically because they live in an entirely different time zone than people who. I mean, it's in a serious. This is a serious point. They live in a different time zone from people whose calendar is based on when am I getting my grant check, or is there a delay with the grant drawdown? That's a different world. And that world creates a different kind of job and employment prospect, and I believe as well it sets a different kind of ambition for people who work in that sector. I've worked in that sector for decades. I know what it's like. I'm lucky enough also to have been able to work in as a private sector animal as well, which is a different class of timescales and ambitions. So I think where Derry can start to make gains fast, I really firmly believe that it will not be in the subsidised arts economy, because that's too fragile and dependent on a particular kind of third party, right? Whereas in the digital economy, I think that's a wide open playing field, and there are already some very smart guys hanging around Derry who live and work there, or who are based there and work globally. I think the guys like John Farron, 360 Productions, Jerry Kindlen with Seagate, for example, Paul McElvaney, the Learning Pool, people who are significant employers in the city, but who are talking to me in terms of 5 years, 7 years down the road. What does Derry need to be like? And to be quite frank, that's where I would get the intellectual energy from, probably more than visiting large-scale companies. I would say though that there are some programme events that epitomise the pathway ahead. I think that the Other Voices trip to Derry next year is an absolutely perfect example of that and Culture Tech to me are the kind of magnets that are going to pull a lot of attention and growth with them.
What are I do want to talk some more about like what it means for the indigenous kind of artists and indigenous culture creators up there. But in terms of the program, in terms of the visiting artists, like what stands out? Go through it and kind of like give people here a reason to go up to Derry next year.
Yeah.
Aside from Other Voices, of course.
Aside from Other Voices, well, some of the heavy hitters. There's a project. Paul Muldoon, Mark Anthony Turnage, and the London Symphony Orchestra are doing at 6s and 7s. That's a really high profile event, and the hope is that that will attract into Derry an audience of people who would otherwise have no reason, so they believe, to come to Derry. And again, that's a risk. All of these things are going to be risks. The Royal Ballet as another similar type piece of programming. Again, really, really high quality, high value brand coming to Derry. I think these are going to. I think they're going to test the local audience. I think they're going to test the audience in the region. I think they're also going to test whether or not it's a viable proposition to put these large scale events on with these kinds of companies in a venue in a city that doesn't have an extensive prior history of doing that, and that isn't yet branded as a destination for that. But you do have to start somewhere. Another really interesting one is the Turner Prize moving to Derry. And that's going to be housed in some converted buildings on the Ebrington Barracks site. The works are going on there at the moment. And there's a large temporary venue there as well. It can hold 4,000 standing, 2,200 seated. And various configurations on it, So there's infrastructure in place for all of those as well. There's a really interesting thing coming up in June as well, 7th to the 9th of June, and you could say like it's a very very interesting take on the cultural and folkloric history of Derry, the industrial history, the military history of Derry, and it's taken the idea of St Columkill, who's a patron saint of the city, and it's making the connection between Derry, Iona. It's making connections with the whole copyright story. The
Columkill and the calf, yeah.
Yeah. To every cow or calf, to every book, it's copy. Allegedly, the initiation in the Western world anyway of IP. And it's going to present a tableau of Derry history over 3 days using the river, the city, both sides of the city, connected by the Peace Bridge, and the walls. And that's been devised by a company called Walk the Plank, who specialise in fireworks, pyrotechnics, large-scale outdoor spectacle, and using hundreds, more than likely thousands of local participants as well. And I think when you look at those higher profile events, they set out to do one class of thing, and that's to establish Derry as a place where these big things can happen. I think it's an open question yet as to what legacy will they leave behind them, which is why a wee while ago I mentioned Martin Malarkey's work, kind of under the radar with a lot of schools, community groups, adult learning groups as well. It's that piece when it's bolted on that has the best chance of having that kind of psychic or intellectual or creative legacy that we need. And I think as well, there's this funny thing, and I really noticed it, over the last few weeks in Derry. There's this kind of, like, everybody puff their chest out and say, yeah, we're great. One of the reasons we're great is we're not Belfast. We're west of the band. Jesus, it's real second city syndrome. I have no problem saying this to people and Derry, because being away and going back, you see things differently. So on the one hand, there's that kind of puffed up chest thing, and I think there's always this niggling little thing. Maybe it's a kind of self-doubt, I wouldn't say it's anything greater than that, but I do detect that sometimes. It's maybe like almost, I wouldn't even call it begrudgery. It's not even cynicism. It's not even skepticism. It's just I wonder, can we really do this?
Yeah, it's the Cork attitude.
Cork attitude.
Yeah,
is it?
Cork people like that.
I wonder if that's
he just thinking to himself, they should have thought that one through before he said it in front of a room of people. Many people. Is there people here from Cork?
Philip King.
Oh, Philip King, yeah, great. Anyway, I know what you say. I know what you say about that. That there is that doubt that can we really pull this off?
Yeah.
So just a question that I suppose I think about, because there was an Orange Parade yesterday in Derry. You've got the Apprentice Boys Parade. Are you incorporating this in any way into City of Culture? Because I know there's big moves on to make an Orange Festival around July 12th.
Aye, the Apprentice Boys in Derry, in my view, have been a very progressive force in the last 7 or 8 years, with the Maiden City Festival. Made in the city because the walls during the siege weren't broken, so it was verga intacta, so to speak. But the Apprentice, I met the Apprentice Boys a few weeks ago, and I was really impressed, I must say, at the conversation I had. They see that there's a space there to have shared history, shared celebrations, shared understanding of a contentious history in a way that could be, again, it could just be a turning moment.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to hear I can't remember what the right title of the fella is. Anyways, it's Big Cheese in the Apprentice Boys, talking about parts of Derry.
The Apprentice Man.
The Apprentice Man. The Apprentice Big Boy. Talking about parts of Derry like Shantallow, where like significant historical figures who played a part in the siege and who played a big part in the history of the Apprentice Boys, they would have had an association with that, but that has never really been explored or even discussed. And these guys are coming at this with I think a really good attitude, which I hope will be reciprocated. And I think part of the City of Culture platform, if you look on the City of Culture designation as a platform where things can be tried, it takes a wee bit of the heat out of it, Whether or not they stick the UK bit on or not doesn't really matter. But the fact that you can have Irish language events happening in Cultural Annichanin in the same programme as the Maiden City Festival, in the same programme as LSO, Muldoon and Mark Anthony Turnage, in the same programme as Other Voices, in the same programme as Culture Tech, we're getting somewhere. I think as well the fact that the physical fabric of the city is being used in a really, I think, a really good assertive way. So the stars of the show include the river. Another star is the Peace Bridge. Another star is the former military barracks in Ebrington. Another star of the show is the walls, and there's so many other stars of the show. Like one of the first things I did when I got back to there was one night I walked over the Peace Bridge. It took me a long time walking over because I kept stopping, looking back, because I had never been on it. A very powerful experience, stunning. And I kept stopping, kind of choking a wee bit, saying, fuck, I can't believe I'm going over to Ebrington. The only way I would have got into Ebrington would have been kicked out of a jeep and thrown in there for, if you were lifted in the street or something like that. And saying, Christ, look what they've done here. It's absolutely magnificent, So there's all these incredible things that have happened. And I think that the challenge is bigger than Derry itself. The thing I said at the start about where does this fit in this is history being made on the island and between the two islands as well. Without doubt, it's the best chance we're going to get to make I think a significant contribution to the East-West relationships. Yeah. It's not going to come around again for a long, long time, I would think. So just as there have been momentous occasions in Derry in the past, some of them dark, some of them very bright, I think this is a chance for a very bright time.
Yeah. A couple of questions, Dermot, just to end up. One is, I know you're only in the job, a couple of wet Dingle days, but, the one thing I've noticed, but since Derry got the UK title, an awful lot of kind of people recommending the places somewhere to go. It was Lonely Planet or Rough Guys kind of got it. There's a lot of interest. Has there been a noticeable kind of upswing in tourist bookings already?
Well,
or is it too early to tell?
Well, I was, on what is the day? Sunday. On Friday, I was talking to a guy called Martin McLaughlin. He runs these guided tours around the city and the walls. He was telling me he has already 250 coach loads booked in for the first half of next year, which is healthy. He said the numbers are going up in the right direction, helped by the UK designation, helped by all of the publicity around that, really boosted by the Lonely Planet thing. I'll tell you really good. Do you know that thing I was saying a wee while ago about that mixture of like confidence and kind of should we be pissed off about this? A really great example was the David Shrigley piece. It was commissioned by London and then it was lent to Derry for a couple of weeks. And I said, small city becomes huge, and the amount of people I heard sounding off about it in Derry was just stunning, and I know exactly where they were coming from. They couldn't believe that a wee thing like that might cost, I don't know what it was, 20 grand or, I don't know, 25 grand maybe. And if you look at the coverage that generated for the city, I'd say it would be a large multiple of 25k. So it put Derry into people's self-created news feeds. That's what the game is at these days. It was actually quite a clever move. Or if it wasn't a clever move, it was a very, very nice unintended consequence of a thing maybe done for one reason. It backfired, but was very, very effective in another way. And that's a really good example of you can't please everybody all the time, and sometimes you have to stop caring about trying to please everybody all the time because there's a job to get done. But the vibe coming back from hoteliers as well is the numbers. In fact, you could say like a strategic weakness for the city right now, but an opportunity that might fully unfold, say, 3 years hence, is the fact that there are 10 planning applications in the pipeline for hotels. A number of those are stalled because there's no money from lenders, obviously, but a number of them are going ahead. There's one just started last week, actually, in the Waterside. So there's an under-provision of hotel beds. But you know what? We knew that anyway. We didn't need UK City of Culture to come to give us a reason to beat ourselves up. But what it has done, it has spurred investment, just as the designation spurred the faster investment in the rail line and the public realm works in Derry as well. And the same is true with even facilities like parking in the city. The local authorities' priority is to get people out of cars and get them walking or using public transport, but never before has it had to be done on the scale. So that has been largely sorted out in good time. So when an event like Flag Hill and the Heron comes to Derry in August, that'll bring somewhere between 200 and 300,000 visits or visitors to the city. We're ready for that. And again, there's this thing, if Cavan can do it, well, Derry can do it.
Okay, so finally, some key dates. Other voices going up in February. Falco and Herald is there in August. When's Culture Tech on?
Culture Tech is July.
July, okay. So they've moved the date.
Aye. Great. Sorry, June. Sorry, beg your pardon, it's June.
June, great, okay. What any other kind of key dates just off the top of your head before you play on June?
The other big one I would say the people to look out for is the Column Kill thing on the 7th of June, that weekend. And the reason I say that is because it's going to use the river in a way that has never been used before. I've seen the creative storyboard for it. It's an absolutely spine-tingling idea. It's going to run for a whole weekend. That's the 7th to the 9th of June. But you know what? All throughout the year, people should come up and have a look. There's an incredibly vibrant visual arts scene in Derry at the moment. There's a fantastic new new space being opened, a thing called the Shirt Factory project down Patrick Street in Derry, down the city factory. It's one of a number of old shirt factories that have remained intact in the city. And the ground floor and the basement there is a contemporary gallery called Void. Then the upper floor has now been turned into a larger scale space to house a major exhibition by Wooly Doherty. He's a very well-known, internationally acclaimed artist from Derry. He's been shortlisted twice in Turner. He's represented by the Kerlin. A real high-end local artist, again, who thinks internationally and globally, happens to be from Derry. And I think that will be a very significant piece of the visual arts jigsaw as well, alongside the Turner Prize coming. The Turner Prize will be going back, Willie staying put. That's... and there's an awful lot to be said for having a heavyweight like that in town.
Cool. Thank you very much for leading us through next year's Derry, Londonderry UK City of Culture programme. Can we call on you for one more tune before you leave?
I'll play another tune. I'll play a slip jig and a kind of a reel. And the slip jig is called Port na Shaggy. That means the jig of the ferries. And it's one of a number of kind of other world inspired tunes that I learned over the years. And then the second tune is called An Chran Dara. That means the oak tree. And the oak tree is one of the symbols of Derry as well. So after me giving it about introverted insular parochialism, I'm ending up playing a tune that's kind of about Derry. So it's very short.
You're here.
All right.
Good moment.